We have a roll call, Mrs. Reiner.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Duffy?
Here.
Mr. Faulkner?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Chikelka?
Here.
Mrs. McMullen? Here. Mr. Tomlinson?
Here.
Mrs. Unger? Here. Mr. Wall?
Here. Before we move on to the agenda, I want to announce that on last Wednesday, I think it is, October 16th, we had an executive session to discuss collective bargaining with the teacher union. On October 17th, the board had a telephone conference executive session to discuss the superintendent's contract. And this evening before the meeting, the board had an executive session to get a legal briefing from our solicitor and also to discuss the assistant superintendent position. So moving on to the agenda, in the minutes from October 8th, 2013. Can we get a motion? Motion to approve. Second. Motion by Mr. Jagelka and seconded by Mr. Wall. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes from the meeting? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. We have one speaker tonight, Mary Bingler.
First, I want to say thank you again to everybody for letting me speak on the topic of Policy 616 at the Finance Committee last week, and the things that you had to say really clarified the reasons that you're making the changes to that policy. So I'm sorry to be coming at you with something else right away. On page 30 of your board packet, you'll find the minutes from the Human Resource Committee meeting that was held earlier this month. Under Section D, Discussion, Information, Action Items, it reads, while other states recognize same-sex marriage, Pennsylvania does not. The district has received a request to provide insurance benefits to a dependent under a same-sex marriage performed in the state of Delaware. The committee recommended not allowing this practice until same-sex marriage becomes legal in Pennsylvania. The district is not required to provide insurance coverage for employee spouses, but that is certainly a benefit to which our society has become accustomed. Now that same-sex marriage is legal in the state of New Jersey, the society of every state in the Northeast except Pennsylvania entitles same-sex spouses that benefit of coverage. It is presumably only a matter of time before Pennsylvania joins the rest of the Northeast in legal acknowledgement of the marriage of gay and lesbian couples. So it would be an enlightened and welcoming act for the Central Bucks School District to provide that benefit to the spouses of our LGBT staff members now, rather than wait until the gay marriage ban is overturned in the state of Pennsylvania and the district is required by law to provide that same benefit of coverage. In our schools and in our community, we spend a great deal of time and effort encouraging our students to be accepting and tolerant, and we ask that the district employees model the same acceptance and tolerance. Providing a legally married same-sex couple the same benefits as our straight employees would be a real-life way to model the understanding we endeavor to instill in our students every day. It would also be a concrete way to let our LGBT students know that we support and acknowledge them as they are. If this school district were to deny the insurance benefits to the legally married same-sex spouse of a Central Bucks employee, the message we would send to our lesbian and gay students and staff would not be one of acceptance and tolerance. It is not illegal to provide benefits to same-sex spouses in the state of Pennsylvania, even while the ban on performing same-sex marriages in the state is in place. The only thing preventing Central Bucks from providing insurance benefits to legally married same-sex couples is a decision by the board. Tonight I am asking that you reject the recommendation made by the Human Resource Committee and accept the employee request to provide insurance benefits to the employee's same-sex spouse. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to make a comment on that, and that is that if you remember that the policies are different, and so the only one has language that prohibits it, one does not, and their policy languages in the insurance policies, and I think that was also an issue that we were struggling with. How do you manage the two separate things? It's not our policy that's written, it's the insurance, what the coverage provides. So
again, going back to 616, that's not something that we pushed out. That's the way we were talking about it. So if that's, maybe we could make that part of public information, like it's just all out there in the minutes, so that we understand why you're saying that that decision was definite. Because I don't have a copy of that document. I don't know that it's telling me if you're not allowed, and I don't understand why, because what's in page 30 doesn't tell me that.
The two different insurance policies, though, were different. And the one they fell under, they didn't fall under it.
Right, there's two different policies. That's the problem.
So it's not our policy, it's the insurance policy that they were trying to fall under.
Okay, with same-sex couples.
I forget how it worded.
I forget the wording, but that was the problem.
Legally married in Pennsylvania or something like that.
That's what it said, something like that.
I think so. She was asking if that could be in the minutes, so they could understand that.
Because that's
that it was the policy.
There's no way to understand that you're saying that your particular policy will allow you to cover it, and that's why you're not. What your minutes say is that you're not going to do it until...
I think you're saying it's our policy. It's not our policy. It's the insurance policy that they've chosen.
But that was in the agenda that was handed out.
It was, yeah.
Right, so if that's what I'm saying. It sounds like you have decided not to do it. It doesn't sound like your insurance policy will allow you to do it.
Okay, that can be this is only in here for information purposes. The minutes don't get approved until that next meeting of that committee. Right? So, no, we don't vote on these minutes here. They get just approved or not approved at the committee meetings. So it's here for information purposes for us only. Okay, thanks. Okay, next we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Corr. We have one superintendent's report. Tonight's the first of a two-part presentation. The first of two on student achievement data. Paul Belts, our assessment coordinator, tonight's going to share the results of our 2013 pssa and Keystone exam results.
I'll start by saying that this was much easier last year before the state made lots of changes in the assessment program and made things a lot more complicated. So I will walk through changes this evening as well as scores in PSSA and also the Keystone exams. Because last year and for the last 5 or 6 years when this report has been presented, the title is PSSA and AYP. AYP, being part of the federal requirements, has now been changed. Every year, if you remember, we would talk about the increasing percentages, how all students, even students from various subgroups, would be required to meet this 100% target in 2014. But that now has been changed. Absent any action by Congress on reauthorization, the U.S. Department of Education has begun granting waivers to states. Most states have taken advantage of waivers. And in August 2013, one was approved for Pennsylvania. That's really good news for us. It means that PA schools are no longer going to be listed as in warning or school improvement or other status solely on the basis of the performance of students in various subgroups. There are new accountability measures for Title I schools only, and the Title I schools in our districts are doing very well with that and will meet those requirements. Of course, being the federal government approving it, there were some strings attached, and some of the strings for the waiver included changes in the teacher evaluation, principal evaluation, standards, some of the things that we've talked about with Act 82 and the Chapter 4 regulations. So in the coming months, you'll hear more about some of these things. One big change, no testing in PSSA in grade 11. So even though AYP was still in effect, this was one change that PDE made before the waiver. We had previously tested all students in math, reading, science, and writing. Those shifted now to Keystone exams. Keystone exams for Algebra 1, Literature, Biology. No exam yet in Keystone writing. So that leaves us with still lots of other tests. In fact, just my rough calculations, we administered about 24,000 separate different PSSA tests this year to CB students this past year. And knowing that most of these are 2 and 3 session tests, so it's really a lot of, it's quite a big effort on the part of students and on the part of teachers and administrators. The PSSA testing procedures, something we really haven't talked about before, but I wanted to give give you at least some sense of what that involves and looks like in the school, given the number of tests. In PSSA, in grades 3 to 8, it's really a 6-week testing event. Counselors, principals, they work through schedules, revise schedules, work through, again, other procedures for test administration. All teachers administering the PSSA test attend an orientation session. And then last year, PD inserted another requirement, which was an online module every teacher had to go through in order to know what the rules and regulations were, because the state really has tightened up on what you're allowed to do and tightened up on the testing procedures. For example, one thing teachers were cautioned about was that they really shouldn't talk to individual children during the assessment. They told them instead provide encouragement to the entire group, not to an individual student. So really making for what I think is a much more, I guess it's a more sterile testing environment, and certainly not as kind and friendly as it had been. And the state even goes so far as to recommend that we not allow our own teacher, a child's own teacher, to be the one administering the exam. They want us to shuffle teachers all around the building so that kids aren't being tested by the teacher they normally work with. That's a recommendation, is one we don't follow, because we just think we have that choice. It is a local decision, and we think it's that it's in our students' best interest to be in a testing environment with someone they feel comfortable with. So the state is making a lot of changes like this, with a few more on the way for this year. Basically, even things like tests and booklets, those will be arriving in late February. Testing starts in March this year. They'll be under lock and key. Last year they went so far as to have all of us sign something saying that we did not come in, we didn't change any answers. We even had night custodians had to sign something saying they didn't sneak in with an eraser and a number 2 pencil to make changes. So a lot of things like that going on with PD at the moment as they tighten security procedures. Seems okay for maybe SAT on a Saturday at CB East. I'm not so sure if it makes sense for third graders. Various PSSA changes in 2012-13. One, I think, was a policy change, and this was at the federal level. I think it was unfortunate because we had a modified version of the test that about 2% of our students could take. These were students with disabilities who were able to take what we thought was a more appropriate version of the test. Fewer items. They were in multiple choice. There were fewer multiple choice items. Many students were meeting success on that test. Students were able to score off, usually at the proficient level on that test. With that being pulled away for 2012-13, we knew we expected going in the scores would be down a bit, a couple of percentage points based on just that one change. So I'll start by saying, as we go into charts and graphs and things, it's not exactly apples to apples this year, but it's as close as we have with that, knowing some changes have been made. Starting with PSSA reading, again, going up to 8th grade, no 11th grade on the test this year, you can see scores in the 80s and 90s, but somewhat lower than last year. And looking at the state results, if you can kind of follow the curve, it's really very, very similar. One thing we always look at is along the bottom, what the difference is between the percent proficient advanced at the state level and at the local district level in Central Bucks. Trying to see, and you'll see across the bottom, and I have it on the next slide as well, that the scores are really remarkably consistent, even compared with last year. In this case, in 5th grade, 83% of students scored proficient and advanced, and 61 scored proficient and advanced at the state, so a difference of 22 percentage points. On the next chart, just to give you another illustration of that, you can see percentage drops that we haven't had before, not this large, especially with the part of it being the modified version of the test. But as we look across at these, we can see also comparing the difference between Pennsylvania results, state results, 2012 going across, and then 2013. It's really, it's almost uncanny how close it is as you look across. But 5th grade example again, 21 points above in 2012. CB was 22 points above in 2013. So again, scores are lower overall, maintaining that same distance because the entire state was lower last year by these same scores. And again, longitudinal results look from 2010 across to 2013 with going left to right, 2013 being in blue. Math scores, you'll see something similar. Again, math scores almost all in the 90s and 89, really very high math scores. And if you look again across the bottom, you'll see similar differences when we go to the next slide. One thing which you'll see is grade 4 and grade 6, again, lower than the other grade levels. We don't have an explanation for that, but lower across the board. If you look, though, again, year to year, the scores, again, we're maintaining a very similar distance in comparing to the state. So again, the scores across the state dropped. And we don't have all that information yet from the state, but from this information, we can see that scores have dropped across the state. I think it's noteworthy that in 7th and 8th grade, again, really very similar scores in terms of CB and the state differences. Go to writing, again, the longitudinal look that you have in the packet in front of you. And scores being lower in 2013. Writing's a bit easier. There wasn't a modified version, and scores remain very high in writing. Looking at PSSA 26 and 23 points, that's a 5th grade and 8th grade test. Longitudinal scores, again, showing strong results. Science, we look at every year, 96% of students proficient advanced to the 4th grade level, incredibly high scores, always dropping a bit in middle school, but again, if you take a look at the difference between the state, it's really a more difficult test for students across the state. In science, it's still maintaining 24 points above that state average. And you can see the longitudinal, a lot of consistency across the board in science. So with PSSA, it really is testing in transition for this year and the next couple of years. I thought about putting some cheesy animation where the target would kind of move around the screen because it is a bit of a moving target at the moment. Modified version. This coming year that we're in right now, last year for the testing on the current PA academic standards, and then changes coming along in 2014-15 with changes related to the PA core standards. That's the quick overview of PSSA. We move to keystone exams. This was one also that should have been more simple than it was. As it starts out, the basic concept is at the secondary level, these will be end-of-course assessments, which we think make a lot of sense, tied specifically to subjects being taught. We had a limited look at this, a limited version of it in 2011 with Algebra 1 testing. Most students in our district are taking Algebra 1 at the middle level, so that was a test taken mainly by middle-level students. For 2012-13, the state offered keystone exams, Algebra 1 literature and biology to replace that grade 11 test. So again, you're assessing students in a keystone-related course. So students in biology in 10th grade, literature in 10th grade, taking the keystone exams last year. Algebra 1 keystone exams start in 7th grade, depending on your course sequence. Some students are taking 7th, others 8th and 9th, even 10th grade. So that was the plan for this past year and what had happened. However, nothing's ever that simple. The feds didn't give them the waiver, didn't release them for AYP purposes. So that meant the Fed said that all 11th graders really had to be tested. So most juniors ended up taking all these exams as well. And if you know anything about the schedule to high school, it's pretty disruptive. So we had a lot of additional juniors taking the test. Middle-level students who had already had algebra the previous year, they were also required to take the keystone exams last year for Algebra 1. So we ended up really giving, again, a lot of keystone tests last year. Middle level and high school for Algebra 1, and then high school, 10th and 11th for literature and biology. The keystones are designed a little bit like an SAT is in terms of students can retake the test, the keystone exam, if they don't score proficient. What I have are just some of the numbers that we have, the results from those kids the state refers to as first-time testers. This is their first time through the test. In Algebra 1, 89% of CV middle and high school students would score proficiently advanced compared with 52% at the state level. I wanted to point out this 95% of middle school students, because it's just a remarkable result. 95% of students on any test passing that, but 95% in algebra, meaning we have very few, just a couple of dozen students that we're working with, we're providing remediation, and we'll be retaking that test as ninth graders. So we, by way of comparison, again, not apples to apples, but in the past, pssa was an 84%. So you might say, why is the 85, why is this 95 higher than the 89? I think the answer is basically those are kids who were taking this while they were either in Algebra 1 or closer to it, and not in trigonometry or something else. In a similar way, really high scores for students taking the Keystone Literature exam compared with the state. And just by some source of comparison to what the PSSA reading was previously in grade 11. Keystone Biology, science has always been lower at the high school level. 70% in the PSSA science test in the past, 72%, but again, compared to that state to 45. Obviously, with all of these scores that we're going to look at where we need to shore up, where we need to do further work. But we know at least that those scores were significantly above that state average. Also, another factor with this is 10th and 11th grade. For this coming school year, it will just be the 10th graders taking it while they're in their biology courses, so that will be significant as well. So we have some students who will take the Keystone Biology test in January because they're taking biology the first semester. Other students will take it in May if they're second semester bio students. So Keystone exams, a little bit of a roadmap ahead. Algebra 1, English 10 bio, and students below level are retesting this year. Class of 2017 is the year that students are going to be required to pass the 3 Keystone exams to graduate, or the state will set aside some, and they're piloting a portfolio process. I mentioned before there's no Keystone writing test, so they are developing a Keystone exam, funding permitting, I think was the term they used for the class of 2019, and they'd also like to add other exams in civics and social studies as well. So in a brief overview, it's been an interesting year of multi-year transitions, and we bring in new tests as we adapt to Keystone exams. A lot of this, again, does connect to Act 82, some of the changes. So these results are all being used with the school performance profile, so the teacher effectiveness, principal effectiveness, and all the scores really all do come back and connect.
So this year we have a change in contemporaneous testing now, so that we've made up that difference for kids who are a year or two removed from a course. They're going to be taking the exam immediately after the course.
They're taking it in the course. So unless you're retesting this year, you're taking it when you're in the course. We've had that catch-up year behind us now.
And you also you mentioned how difficult it is scheduling-wise at the. Will that also alleviate? Because last year we had a big problem, right, with putting Keystone. Keystone, SAT, PSSA,
it was a lot.
Jammed in there at one time.
The May test, the May Keystone, there is still a Keystone happening in May, and I don't know the exact dates compared with some of the SATs and the AP. So that problem, I think, is unlikely to go away, but it will be affecting fewer juniors. It will mainly be a 10th grade event at the high school, which will help.
And last year, didn't we make a request to the state, and I don't think we were alone, right? I think there were other districts that were making requests changing the timing of certain tests.
And it really hasn't changed. But again, I think this year we won't be testing as many juniors as we were, so it'll be less problematic.
When you go back and look at the tests year over year, are you seeing a change in the type of questions and how they're asking it to maybe account for some of that delta, or is there no rhyme or reason?
It's an interesting question because I'm not permitted to look at the tests. They even say if you're teacher proctoring, you should try not to look at the test. We're not allowed to discuss the test. So even afterwards, you cannot. The only thing we have is that every few years they release what they call item samplers, release passages from previous tests. The last time we had one of those from pssa, I think, was 3 years ago. So they do give us a roadmap. They say these are the types of, these are the genres they will read from in reading, for example. And they will give us, they will say there are X number of multiple choice and other tests, but we really aren't able to go back and look at the tests themselves. So we take their word for it.
Great. Interesting. It's actually algebra.
Actually, here it is.
So if we don't look at it, how do we help the students who didn't do well on it? How do you remediate those children?
What we do is we do get a breakdown by reporting category, they call it. So we can see in math, for example, there's a particular area of students who we got, and we work from that. So that's what we do. We do get, it's not a really detailed item analysis, but at least the general categories that we're able to go in and look at. We've already looked at some of that, both in reading and math, and we'll continue to do that both at the building level and the district level.
They're part of the data meetings that we had spoke of the last meeting, where they can drill down to individual students, see what areas they need help in.
So Keystone helps address some of that.
Keystone does, because they also give reports for both the winter and the spring. We receive reports that detail where students did, which categories they were lowest, which ones they were highest. So we do get that information. So that can then translate to biology teachers looking at that part of the curriculum. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Paul. Okay, next item, we have the school board reports there for your information, and we'll move on to recommendations for action.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. The first two items under recommendations for action, I'll ask Mr. Battis to categorize for you.
Yes, for our treasurer's report, we had a beginning cash balance in the general fund of $26.1 million. Receipts for September totaled $42.5 million. Disbursements totaled $57.6 million, leaving an ending cash balance of $11 million. As for the general fund, our capital fund had expenditures of $2.7 million, food service fund of $68,000, total vol fund disbursements $60,335,523.65. And we ask board approval of the treasurer's report.
Motion to approve. Second. Motion by Mr. Jagelka and second by Mr. Wall. Any questions or comments on the treasurer's report? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
One abstention, please, Mrs. Reiner.
One abstention. Motion carries.
Next, we have budgetary transfers to close out the 2012-2013 fiscal year. These are budget transfers within our expenditure budget to cover line items where we under budgeted and filling them with areas where we over budgeted for expenses. And we ask board approval of these final budget transfers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wall, seconded by Mr. Jagelka. Any questions or comments on the transfers? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, we're seeking your approval to set the facility use fee schedule for the 13-14 school year. Just by way of review, these are for outside use charges, and they will be the same as they were in the 12-13 school year. Motion to approve. Item C.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Faulkner, seconded by Mrs. Unger. Any questions or comments on the fee schedule?
I appreciate that they're staying the same. I've got a lot of calls about that, and I think the good thing to do for the community, DAA, CBAA, Buckingham, a lot of organizations use the facilities, and it's a great way for the kids to have activities after school, so I appreciate that the district was able to keep them the same for this year.
And also, as part of this process, we have to start watching the internal expenses and offer some guidance on how to reduce those expenses.
We've already started. And I think that was a good, months ago we were debating whether to have that column in and actually have the charge back and that kind of thing. I think it was a better way to go about it. But just kind of looking at it for at least now and then decide what we want to do from it. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, we're seeking your approval of School Board Policy 616. Remember, this was one of 3 business office policies that were shared at our previous board meeting. 616 was held for further discussion at our last finance meeting, so it needs A, to come back off of the table, and then B, for you to approve or disapprove.
Can we get a motion to bring the policy back to the floor?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Faulkner.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Unger. Any questions or comments on that?
Just by way of reminder, this board policy was recommended by PSBA. The only significant change, the only change in it was to address the concern of the approval and ratification of superintendent purchases or payments.
Okay, let's get a vote on it coming back to the floor. Anybody, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's on the floor. Can we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Faulkner and seconded by Mrs. Unger. And I think we did make those revisions to language after discussion. And,
Yes, they're in there.
Any other questions or comments on that?
To Dr. Weitzel's credit, too, he's the one that proposed this. It didn't come from the board, but he proposed his own approval of expenses, so that was pretty impressive on his part. So
We still hold those $11 there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, we're seeking your approval to modify our health care plan in accordance with the Affordable Care Act. What we're asking for is to bring some uniformity to our preventive care components of our health care acts. By doing this, it will really solidify, modify the way we approach each contract. It will be a money saver since we don't have to charge people for preventive care under one plan and not under the other. So we're asking for your approval to make the coverage free of charge for preventive care.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jagelka and seconded by Mr. Wall. Any questions or comments on that? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, we're seeking your approval of auxiliary compensation for substitute teachers. Again, by way of review, we wanted to shorten the period where per diem subs would increase their rate from $90 a day, although it's broken down by hour, to $105 a day from 40 days to 21 days. Also to set the rate for our long-term per diem subs at $150 a day, which is, again, we're breaking it down into hours now at a rate of $23.70 an hour. Motion to approve? I'm sorry, let me just correct that. Sorry, it's from $23.70 to $19.75. My mistake.
Motion by Mr. Faulkner.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Duffy. Any questions or comments on that?
During our discussions, you did state that this would make us more competitive in the marketplace in terms of getting and holding subs.
That's correct. We're competing more and more for subs. The rate was lowered to $130 a day. Felt that was too low in terms of being competitive and asking your approval to raise that to $150 a day. Again, that's for long-term subs. Those are the subs who make lesson plans, attend conferences, and do the regular teacher work.
And that was something we were at a higher rate. We dropped it back, but the feeling is we dropped it back too much.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on it? Not all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So next I will present this. The next item on the agenda is the approval of a 3-year employment contract for Dr. David Weitzel as superintendent of the district. So can we get a motion on that before?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Faulkner, seconded by Mrs. Unger. She went. Any questions or comments on that?
I do appreciate Dave. Dr. Weitzel seemed very good about this whole process, and it was kind of fresh air. It really, the focus was not on himself, but what's best for the district and best for the kids, and it was great. So he took the job without a contract. It was pretty nice of him for a while. And you're not very smart. Your agent wasn't the best agent, but he did a great job. Yeah. So
I would say I do appreciate that. When we obviously all the stuff we were going through in the summertime, and just being sent as the emissary from the board to talk to Dr. Weitzel about this, his first reaction was, "I'll do it. Don't worry about the contract. We'll figure that out as we go along. We'll just get it done in the time. But I need to get things back in shape." And clearly, from conversations that we've had with our administrators, things are back in shape, and with our teachers as well. I mean, I know that there has been a very positive feeling from the administrative staff. I know, having spoken with Rob Olson, that the teachers are also thrilled with you in this position, and it was good for all of us. So thank you very much for that and your patience with it.
I'd also like to thank you for having done two jobs for the past several months, and really doing both very well.
Thank you.
And without complaints. This is about the easiest process ever.
Don't ask anything.
Very quiet over there.
I thank them for their quietness.
It really was an interesting negotiation where the whole discussion really was Dave just saying, we'll just do what's fair. And that's kind of a nice place to be when we're having this kind of discussion. So thank you for that.
Great. Any other questions or comments? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our our personnel items. I ask routine items. You can group them 1 through 10. 1 through 10. We have an absent officer on the EDR. So again, if you wouldn't want to vote on them collectively, page 1 through 10.
Motion to approve personnel items 1 through 10.
Second. Motion by Mrs. Unger, seconded by Mr. Jagelka. Any questions or comments on items 1 through 10? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to point out to the board and to the audience, with doing that, you approved one of our new administrators, and he happens to be here, Mr. Matt Murray. Matt, if you'd stand, he's our new videographer. Welcome, Stevie. I reminded him he may have to get others, it's like South, CB West colors, CB East colors, although you will kind of live at CB South. Welcome, Matt. Next, we're seeking approval of personnel item for the EDRs. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Faulkner, seconded by Mrs. McMullen. Any questions or comments on the EDRs? If not, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One abstention, please, since my wife is listed in the EDRs.
Good. One abstention, motion carries.
Next, we have a series of student items. First, approval of the tuition student for the 2013-14 school year. Next, approval of the CB South Latin 2 and 3 classes to travel to New York in November 14th. Approval of CB East Global Relations classes to travel to New York December 3rd. Approval of Halicon Middle School 9th grade classes to travel to Washington on April 2nd. Approval of CB South Band to travel to Cleveland, Ohio from April 10th through the 13th. And last, approval of the CB West Choir to travel to Virginia from May 1st through the 4th.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. McMullen, seconded by Mrs. Unger. Any questions or comments on the student items? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And last, seeking your approval of staff conferences. Those are located on the last page of your packet. The total is $1,184. That money is all from federal grant money.
Motion to approve staff conferences and workshops.
Second. Motion by Mrs. Unger and seconded by Mr. Jagelka. Any questions or comments on the conferences and workshops? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does anybody have anything else that they want to discuss this evening? Then we will take a motion to adjourn. Second. Adjourn. All right. Thank you.